So good morning, shalom, buenos dias, and welcome to this LinkedIn live event by Bayer. It's great to see so many people joining in from all over the world. I see people from Latin America, Australia, US, Asia, and Europe calling in. A big and warm welcome to all of you. My name is Hugo. I'm the Managing Director of Bayer Israel, and I'm going to be your host for the next hour, and I believe we have a great hour ahead of us. So during the next 60 minutes, you will get to learn more about Bayer's G4A program, meet some representatives from some highly innovative and exciting Israeli companies who has worked with Bayer and G4A in the past, and learn more about the Israeli innovation ecosystem. So first, why do we do this kind of meeting? What is it we want to achieve? Short answer, collaboration. Bayer is constantly looking for innovative, creative, agile startups and companies who would be interested in collaborating with us. And one way of facilitating this collaboration is through G4A. And during today's session, you'll hopefully learn more about what G4A is all about. And who knows, maybe our next collaboration partner is listening in on this event to that. With that being said, I would like to introduce you to our speakers today. With us today is Mike Devoy, Chief Medical Officer, Head of Medical Affairs and Pharmacovigilance in Bayer. Karina Rubinstein is jumping in on a very late notice for a person who unfortunately had to hand in a sick leave. But Karina Rubinstein is Senior Director of Business Development at the Israeli Innovation Authority. We have Michal Meiri, the CEO of Agamon, Yossi Bahagon, co-founder and chairman of Sweetch, and Dominic Kennerson, which is the global head of G4A. So to all of you listening online, please take the opportunity to interact with us, give us feedback, use the keyboard to punch in some comments online. We would really appreciate that. And if you don't mind, also ask us some questions. I cannot guarantee you that we will be able to address all of them, but we will try our very much our best during the next 55 minutes. So with that being said, let's start the program. Our first speaker has more than 20 years of experience from the pharmaceutical industry. Mike Devoy has witnessed and been an active part of the significant transformation our industry is going through. One vital part of this journey is the increasing collaboration between startups and Bayer. And here Mike for many years has played an active role, in particular as a mentor and a link between Bayer and the young companies. Again, Mike Devoy is Chief Medical Officer, Head of Medical Affairs and Pharmacovigilance for Bayer Pharmaceutical, and he's also a member of the Executive Committee of Bayer Pharma. Mike Devoy, please, the word is yours.
Mike, you're
on mute. So, yeah.
I should have learned that by now. So my warm welcome to everybody. Great to be with you today on this excellent platform and opportunity, both to have a really wide geographic spread, as Hugo said, and also a really wide range of participants in terms of backgrounds. And yes, I've been an active part of Bayer's digital journey for several years now and actively mentoring companies. And one question is, why would Bayer be involved and getting so engaged in the digital space and looking for partnerships? And really, I see that because we had two real important trends: the increasing ability of technologies to help and deliver ongoing monitoring support, allow patients, consumers to engage in initial symptoms, diagnosis, treatment, recovery, and even follow-up beyond that. And also healthcare systems, payers, stakeholders who increasingly want to understand what is the value, what is the output, what is the overall benefit to patients from an intervention rather than just what is the healthcare input. So it's even more important for participants in the healthcare ecosystem to actually be delivering and demonstrating value to patients and health consumers. And we've seen in response to that a real flourishing of digital healthcare options, startups, companies, and now companies maturing and growing much further. And what we've seen, and I've seen in partnering and mentoring from Bayer, is the great innovation, the great energy, the agility, the speed, the real clear focus on the patient, the consumer from these companies, that is really beneficial and helpful to us as a company in terms of reframing our approach and driving our patient customer centricity beyond just the product. But also, I've seen it of great benefit to the companies involved, because the healthcare space is complex. There's a lot of barriers, a lot of regulations, a lot of appropriate safeguards, because we're dealing with the most important topic for all of us in dealing with healthcare. And that's equally where a company like Bayer has been of great assistance, because we're skilled and extremely experienced in navigating regulatory barriers. And also, as today demonstrates, we're truly a global company. So we're understanding and a reach in markets all across the globe. So it's really been, I think, a mutually beneficial experience for Bayer and for the companies we've worked with. And maybe I could say a little more about where we see the growth potential and the potential for collaboration going forward. And from our perspective, we increasingly see the need for what we call integrated care, rather than just dealing with a specific illness or topic at a point in time, really supporting the patient, the healthcare consumer on their journey by bringing together digital health and personalized and data-driven feedback and care for them. Delivering a pill, making a diagnosis is no longer adequate option, as I've said, in a world where we look for value and integrated care. And we also see that each of us wants to be more in control of our healthcare, more able to make decisions, more able to adjust to the circumstances, and keen to get feedback and learning, maybe not just every 6 months when we visit the hospital or visit our doctor for a follow-up appointment, checkup, but on a daily or even more frequent basis, but regularly getting feedback input. Are we following the care plan? How could we improve? And also using the technology, it allows us to be much more personalized, much more individualized, because how I may respond to a treatment and intervention may be different from the individual who lives next door to me, even if we have the same underlying diagnosis. So increasingly we can give feedback, give data that can allow each of us to adjust our care and respond such that we really can much more optimize care. And one example of where we've been moving in integrated care is Bayer is actively collaborating and investing in a company called OneDrop, or Informed Data Systems. And there we're really looking to develop joint digital health products for multiple therapeutic areas, for example, oncology, cardiovascular disease, women's healthcare, with a belief that we can improve overall outcomes, but also, as I say, bring that to an individual and patient level. And what do we think that's going to look like in the near future? And I think we've seen the last 12 months with the pandemic really accelerated some and removed some of the barriers in this space in terms of us understanding how much can be done remotely and digitally. So we've seen the transformation in terms of digital health solutions and the platforms that are available, and the need and the benefit of us, each of us, accessing our own health information, learning from that and taking feedback, and increasing, hopefully, our satisfaction with care. And again, as we see people being more proactive, more engaged, more demanding of what the healthcare system is providing to them, what a physician is telling them, wanting more control, more ownership of their own health, more empowerment, so to speak. And also we want to move from finding diseases late, perhaps when they present with complications or serious end-term consequences, to starting to give interventions and support where we can hopefully prevent serious chronic conditions, or at least intervene much earlier in the life cycle of the disease, such that we can reduce the burden on the healthcare system and, importantly, reduce the burden on each of us with chronic conditions. So really, how can we move from diagnosis to treatment to prevention and overall support, and really doing that with technology, with mobile apps, monitoring devices, and increasingly take advantage of artificial intelligence to learn for each of us what is the best way to treat my disease, not just from a pharmaceutical point of view, but what are the lifestyle interventions in terms of diet, exercise, other things that may help me provide a better form of care. And also, to use a phrase of jargon, moving from to contactless care. It may not be that we don't see a doctor ever, but how can we optimize the time between our doctor's appointments to really be an active participant in improving our healthcare? So Hugo, that's really my short perspective of the journey we're on and why Bayer is such a keen and active participant in this space. And as you said, really looking to partner, work with, support companies entering this field or companies already active in this field.
Mike, fantastic. Thank you so much. I think that's a great introduction to what we want to achieve here today. I think we have time for just a few questions, and just a reflection I'm making as well. Both you and I have more than 20 years of experience from the pharma industry, and it's certainly changed, at least from my perspective, from the time where you and I started. So you worked with companies, you worked with these start companies as a mentor for many years also with Bayer. So what would you say about the change that these companies has gone through when it comes to maturity and the growth of these companies? What is your observations?
So I've really enjoyed each of the companies I've worked with and mentored, and the other companies that have entered our G4A program. But it's really very clear and very good, in my opinion, how much more mature, how much more deeply knowledgeable companies are now when they start up in the healthcare space. A few years ago, it was all a bit unclear to us how this would evolve, what the right things were to focus on. Lots of very enthusiastic entrepreneurs, but now we see a much greater level of maturity in terms of what are the services I want to bring, what are the real problems I want to solve for, and how can I really improve outcomes for the patient, the consumer, and the healthcare system. And we've also seen the ecosystem change in terms of governments trying to help. In Germany, we have the Digitalization and Innovation Act, so physicians can now actually prescribe a digital app if it's got health benefits, and that can be reimbursed by the healthcare system. So a real, important option there that was a number of companies struggled with in the early days. How do I actually achieve revenue? How do I get paid for the benefits I'm bringing? And we also see regulators, WHO, FDA, starting to put a framework and regulation that helps companies understand the environment they're operating in, and the technologies all the time improve, be that artificial intelligence or just access to remote apps and other technology. And as I say, the last year has certainly also reduced some of the questions or reticence to use these tools, because many of us have, like we are now, been driven to use much more remote platforms and tools and learn how useful and beneficial they can be to really take control of topics, including our healthcare. So I see every year as we engage with the companies, more maturity, more understanding of the problems they're trying to solve, and a greater understanding of the benefit from partnerships.
Amazing. I'm going to lure in one last and final question, since you probably could talk for hours about this topic, but very shortly, if you could give one single advice to companies who wants to partner with Bayer, what would that advice be?
Very simple. Be clear what you want from Bayer. Bayer is a large organization with lots of resources, human, financial, experience. But what is it your company needs that will really be transformational, really take it forward by working with Bayer? As I mentioned, we are a global company. We operate in most countries of the world. We have experienced and competent people in all those geographies. We understand a lot about different healthcare markets. We have a lot of therapeutic knowledge in the areas we operate in, a lot of regulatory knowledge. We also can help unlock barriers, be it regulatory. I think if it's just a financial transaction, then there may be many other sources of funding. I think what Bayer can bring is knowledge, experience, a real sense of partnership, a long and deep understanding of healthcare and what it takes to be successful there.
Mike Devoy, a pleasure having you on board. Thank you so much for joining us and giving the introduction to this great event. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Hugo. Great.
With that being said, I'll move on to the next speaker. And my introduction here is also a personal reflection. Lived in Israel now for about 2 years and learned to understand the ecosystem. So Karina, I'm now going to brag a little bit about Israel, and then hopefully you can bridge your presentation into my bragging. Because in the past, we've seen a significant number of applicants and also winners for G4A coming out of Israel. And to better understand why is this so, I believe it's important to take a closer look at the Israeli ecosystem of innovation. And our next speaker represents the Israeli Innovation Authority, a vital stakeholder in one of the most innovative countries in the world. Actually, and according to the World Economic Forum's Global Competitiveness Report, Israel is the second most innovative country in the world. Israel has the largest number of startups per capita in the world. Several thousands were founded just in the past decade, and Israel is home to more than 350 R&D centers of some of the world's largest multinationals. And I also read an article this morning. There are more unicorns, as companies valued more than $1 billion coming out of Israel than in the whole of Europe. Now I've been bragging enough to give us some more insights to this fantastic ecosystem. I'm happy and honored to welcome Karina Rubinstein, Senior Director of Business Development at the Israeli Innovation Authority Startup Division. And thanks again, Karina, for stepping in on such a short notice. It's highly appreciated. Karina, please.
So thank you so much, Hugo, and everybody from Bayer and everybody from the world. I'm so excited to be here. It's really an honor. So thank you again. And thank you for bragging on Israel. I think we've done quite a lot in these past 2 years since you've landed here. And things are moving fast, I'm happy to say. But, you know, having said all of that, this is really an opportunity for Bayer to jump into other opportunities we offer as a government agency here. And you know them all. I'm nagging on a daily basis. But Bayer is really so involved here already in 2 incubators we are supporting and in other activities. So really, it's a great activity and will probably be even larger than that. So how does Israel done all of that up until now? We started actually with our visionary Herzl back in the late 19th century, while he was actually visioning the state of Israel. And then afterwards, along the time, the involvement of multinationals have started here. And we ran from an R&D nation by the chief scientist office here in the government of Israel, through all of the years up until the early 90s, where the government has actually invested in the venture capital industry here and helped create that. So Yozma was taking place in the early 90s, and then over the years, when the startup nation has created through that, we have turned actually ourselves from a unit in the ministry in the Ministry of Commerce into an independent authority in order to make more than we can as with the government's budget, with the government's money. Turning on from 2016 up until today, we are moving from startup nation actually into a scale-up nation, and this really is a task that we are looking at right now. As resonating to what Hugo mentioned just now, Israel has a civilian expenditure on R&D, the highest percentage out of the GDP. We are competing with South Korea on the first place here, way over the average in the world. So that said, with the involvement of multinationals here and nearly 400 R&D centers, and the HealthTech is being 50% of the HealthTech products turning into from these R&D centers of the multinationals here in Israel. Why indeed does it need to have government involvement here in such a very successful ecosystem? So what makes it so successful? I think over the years we have created here a functioning ecosystem, cross proliferation of all the ingredients needed in this ecosystem, and this is already orchestrating and working very well. From human capital coming out of the defense system in Israel, top-notch research in the academia, a lot of private funding that pours in, companies, multinational companies, and mentioned before, the startup ecosystem, and so on. And of course, the government's involvement here. And the government involvement role is needed really to complement the private money. We have three directions that we actually pouring the money into, where we act upon market failures, or we call it, where there's a scarce of private money, not enough startups being created, tough markets, and so on, where we can remove barriers to entry to market and create new growth engines. And so just to say a few words about us as the main government agency, with our main mission is to promote the Israel economy through investments in innovation and sustainable and inclusive innovation. And we work the Israel Innovation Authority bottom up. The market approaches us. We had in 2020 last year, although it was a tough year in all ways, we received 3,500 submissions, which is way beyond average, and we managed to support with nearly $700 million dollars of our budget into these industry applications. So we supporting across the scale from single entrepreneur to large companies, and we work on conditional loans, where actually we give grants, and if you're successful and reach market, you repay us as royalties out of your sales, and if not, we share the failure, as they say. So sharing the failure is one of the items that makes this ecosystem actually functioning and growing, because startups are even if they fail, these entrepreneurs keep on trying to the next startup, and with our grants and help, they can do so. This is non-dilutive funding that we give, and it helps them actually move to the next stage. That said, just to in the context of Bayer and this marvelous event, we are investing in the future of tech, and one of our strategies now is moving into the HealthTech, next HealthTech, so future medicine solutions. We call it BioConvergence. It's a national strategy that we help move on, promote, and it's actually the intersection between engineering and biology. And this is the face of the future as we see it in these complex solutions facing the challenges of the global health. We are not the only ones that are saying that. You can look at the McKinsey report of this year. The bioconvergence is going to be have a global economic impact, and it's a huge market that we are going to invest in. We already started in 2020, and we're going to invest in the next decade in all ways. And one of the opportunities there for international collaborations, of course, and we would like help to promote it very much, and this is an opportunity to do so. So having said all of that, thank you so much again for this opportunity.
That is perfect. Thank you so much. I had, actually, I got a questions in advance for you guys, and it was basically for those companies who now want to reach out to the Israeli Innovation Authority. There are outside companies that want to establish themselves in Israel, or there are already Israeli companies. I guess they would know very well about you. Is it just to reach out and contact you? Will you be? Do you have a service department that basically take care of all these requests that you're getting? How does it work, Karina? Can you give a very short answer to this one?
So as you know, I'm very I'm very approachable, and no problem approaching me. We have a service, of course, and there's no problem. We can be reached through email, through WhatsApp, phone, of course. All the proper ways, or unorthodox ways as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much again. And for doing this on such a short notice. I tell the audience you did this with a request of less than 24 hours notice. So thank you, Karina, and I'm sure we will speak again very soon.
Thank you so much.
Our next speaker comes from a company who was selected a program finalist by G4A in 2018. This great company, Agamon, was founded by Michal Meiri, CEO, in 2018. And like all other startups, it all starts with identifying a challenge and then creating a solution. In Agamon's case, the company was founded on the idea that it wanted to help health system make sense of their unstructured clinical data. What this means, I'm sure we will hear more about now. Please, Michal, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here and take part in this webinar. And I feel like I'm in a really good company because not only are we supported by G4A and Bayer, but also by the Israeli Innovation Authority. So thank you all. So I'll start by telling you a bit about Agamon. And as you mentioned, the majority of healthcare data today generated by healthcare systems, mainly hospitals, is free text. When you go to see a physician, they would generate a report, which is textual report. And our mission is to help them leverage this data to be able to personalize and improve patient care with this data. Specifically, we decided to start with radiology. This problem exists everywhere, but we decided to start with radiology reports for the reason being that about 50% of patients who receive a follow-up recommendation in the radiology report fail to complete those recommendations. And if you look at a case of cancer, for example, that can obviously result in late diagnosis, in increased liability, and missed revenue opportunity for healthcare systems. So what we do is we provide an AI and natural language understanding platform that we developed with our own technology that takes these unstructured textual reports and transform it into structured data with actionable insights. And by doing that, we improve the quality of care, we reduce claim risk, and then we help them increase revenue. Today, we work with some very large healthcare systems in the US, including Henry Ford Health System, Jefferson Health, which we received a grant from the Israeli Innovation Authority, and a few other large ones. And we also have a few partners in Israel. But I know the focus of the session today is to tell companies and other startups about our experience with Bayer G4A. So I would say that in our case, we were in the 2018 cohort, so a few years back. I don't know if many people know that, but Bayer is a very large player in radiology, especially in the US market. And for us, that was a great opportunity to collaborate with such a large company. We were lucky to have a champion within the organization that was an expert in the radiology domain. And by having this partnership in place with Bayer, with G4A, first of all, we learned a lot about the market, specifically about the contrast media market, about the presence of Bayer in those large radiology practices and health systems. It allowed us to create exposure and brand recognition by allowing us to use the Bayer G4A name. and obviously to experience this collaboration with the very large corporates such as Bayer in the very early days of the company. So I think if I can recommend for companies who are looking to apply for this program, I would say, first of all, to focus on a very clear use case, because both sides would like to kind of make the best out of their time and their resources. And for doing that, we need to make sure that we have the right use case, the right champion within the organization, the right team to be able to work with and move it forward. I would say that you need to be very open. You need to have a lot of patience, because it's a very different pace to the one we have in startup environment. But at the same time, I think that after speaking with the G4A team, I know that there've been a lot of learning in the past few years, and now they are looking to have a dedicated team within Bayer to work closely with these startups and to focus on very specific use cases. So thank you for your time, and happy to answer any questions that you have.
That is fantastic, and thank you so much. Very concise, precise presentation. Thank you. Before I go to the question, I'm going to give an introduction to my question to you, because I was reading online that in a reply to a journalist that asked you if you would have any advice to startup companies, you said that it's a tough journey, so make sure you do something that you truly enjoy doing and feel passionate about, and if you find it, just keep pushing. I can see you smiling, so hopefully I'm correct that this is something you said. But in addition to having the passion, the will, and the drive, if you were to do this all over again and give advice to people now online, if there's somebody here with a startup, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I'll start with the first part of your question. I think that there was something really good that came out of COVID for companies like us that is now created much more exposure and understanding of the need of technology for healthcare organizations, both pharmaceutical companies, payers, providers, and so on. So I think that will change, and hopefully it will become easier for companies like us to enter this market than what it used to be beforehand. I think other than, as you said, like being very passionate about what we do, the state of the healthcare industry is very different to other industries, like I would say even like financial services, who is much more advanced than others. And the ability to take a very niche and specific problem will really help you grow within this industry. I think at the same time, you need to be very careful of not customizing your product for each and every organization you work with, because that's a real trap, and you want to be able to build a scalable and replicable solution. I think the advantage that Agamon had is the fact that we worked very closely with our customers. They became, in a way, our design partners, our early customers, and we made sure that we, from the one end, like cater for their needs, but at the same time build a technology platform, again, that can be scalable across other health systems. We've trained our algorithms on millions of data points, and that allowed us now to be able to support very large health systems. So just to summarize, I think the combination of like having the passion in place, but solving a very specific use case,
yes,
and not just thinking about the technology, but thinking about the entire workflow, that's really key. And I think that's what helped us at least succeed in the market.
I think that's a great answer, and you're also linking it back to the introduction that Mike made in the very beginning of being very specific. What is the challenge? What is it you want to solve? And then coming up with the brilliant solution that you guys did. I wish you the very best of luck going forward. I know you're on a success path already, and thank you so much for joining us in this meeting today and sharing your thoughts and ideas with us. It's highly appreciated, Michal. Thank you.
Thank you.
So another company that has been selected program finalist by G4A is Sweetch, a company that has identified and recognized and created a solution for the following. So approximately half of the adult population in developed countries have some sort of chronic disease. But few of us, unfortunately, are adhering to treatment protocols. We're not following disease prevention protocols. And this is what Sweetch has done successfully something about. They have turned this challenge into an opportunity. They have developed a clinically validated platform that utilizes artificial intelligence, both to increase adherence and for us to follow health programs, disease prevention, and disease management recommendations. So Sweetch, the floor is yours. Yossi Bahagan, the co-founder and chairman of Sweetch, the word is yours.
Thank you, Hugo, and thank you, the entire Bayer team, not only for the opportunity to present, but also for the mutual journey going through the selection process and now moving into the commercial discussions. It's been not only a pleasure personally, but also a very educating journey for us as a company. As you mentioned, what Sweetch targets is increasing the likelihood of the patient doing what he or she needs to do. You know, we have a long list, an average chronic patient have a long list of assignments, but sometimes we forget that the patient is not a walking disease. You know, these patients have lives. They care about their quality of life. So if we really want to touch them in a way that will create a long-term and sustainable disease management optimization, we need to think from the patient's eyes and what will drive this patient to action and how to do it in a way that will be like your guardian angel, a system that will be beside you to support you at times where you are doing great, but also at times when you are challenged. In short, you know, we are living in a world where the word vaccine is very strong one. Essentially, what Sweetch developed is a digital vaccine for chronic diseases. It's clinically validated, it's AI-powered, it's proactive, it's super personalized, and because it's data-driven, it's also scalable. So, as I said, we trigger behaviors through AI with focus on sustainable outcomes. Many of the patients that we touch don't have only one disease. You know, 70% of the diabetic patients have also hypertension. So how do you look at the patient in a holistic way and tackle the interactions with the patients in a way that the overall reaction, whether it's medication adherence or weight management or activity or remote monitoring, will all be seen in a holistic way. We are living in an era where, you know, data, more and more data is coming in. And this is how, you know, remote patient monitoring current output looks like. Number of steps, what's your heart rate, what's your glucose levels, and so on. But what is missing is what is my specific recommendations. Think about all this data coming in. Is think about you would have Waze or any other transportation navigation system. You would want to go from point A to point B, and the system will only tell you the distance. Will only tell you in our health equivalent, you need to walk 10,000 steps a day. So similar to Waze, Sweetch is a personal navigation system. It takes real-time monitoring, add to it your personalized goals, preferences, life habits, and then it creates a personalized journey for you specifically. How do we do that? We collect data from the patient's smartphone and other connected devices. Without asking the patient any questions, we understand the patient's context, where you live, where you work, how do you commute from work to home, what are your favorite coffee shops, are you a heavy shopper, are you an early bird, are you a night owl, and so on. And based on the understanding of the patient's life habits, or the way we like to call it, the patient life print, because each and every one of us have this unique life print. We repeat, there are repeatable patterns in our life, and then we are able to move from a generic, hey, you need to walk 10,000 steps a day, to a highly contextual message like the following. Good morning, Lara. You have 45 minutes before your next meeting. It's raining outside, so take an umbrella and go pick up a cappuccino from Lion Coffee Roasters at 4 Everton Park. It's only 9 minutes away. You will feel more vivid and achieve your 90-minute activity goal. Everything in this message was created automatically, from understanding Lara's whereabouts, to her availability, to her surroundings, to what will be the goal that will be achievable and yet challenging. And the same principle of contextualization follows in every interaction with the patient. Instead of telling the patient, hey, you need to walk 10,000, you need to measure your glucose now, out of the blue, the type of messages that Sweetch sends is, hi, Brian, hungry? We notice you just entered Route 57 restaurant. How about taking 30 seconds to measure your glucose? Take care of your body, and it will take care of you. Essentially, Sweetch, what Sweetch does, it's learning the patient's past behavior and current context and translating it into real-time recommendation, which has a higher chances that the patient will indeed follow. And likewise with other examples, like recommending a specific walk based on a specific glucose level, or hi Mary, good morning, we didn't want to disturb you while driving, it's time for your Saxenda. So understanding the patient context in order to increase adherence, and similarly with regards to weight management and patient-reported outcomes. From a clinical perspective, the first clinical trial was done by Johns Hopkins in a pre-diabetic population without any human intervention. The system achieved 86% patient retention rate, clinically and statistically significant A1C reduction, weight loss, increase in physical activity, and actually almost 23% of these patients reversed their diabetic state and returned to normal A1C levels. Now think what such a system with such a high scalability from one hand and such a high personalization from the other hand could do on a global level for the 450 million people suffering from diabetes. While we started our journey from the diabetes management and diabetes prevention, the same principle of just-in-time adaptive intervention, sense and collect data, analyze it in real time, engage and optimize the engagement with the patient on an ongoing basis, is now deployed in other disease domains like cardiovascular, autoimmune diseases, and oncology. Again, it's all about looking at the world from the patient eyes. It's the experience focused on you, and then making the outstanding user experience being translated into improved outcomes. Just to close with the further clinical evidence that we are collecting, and this is also an opportunity to say thank you for the Israel Innovation Authority, which also supported us all along the way from the first year to the to last year. We just got a grant from the NIH together with Johns Hopkins to conduct the first ever prospective randomized control trial that will compare Sweetch fully automated intervention with the gold standard, which is a CDC-approved intervention. On the more strategic level, we are creating a new layer of data, behavioral data that obviously we all understand that has huge impact on disease outcomes. Thank you everyone for the attention and the time, and again for Bayer for providing this amazing opportunity to present and to collaborate with them.
Yossi, an amazing presentation. Thank you so much. And wow, what a data. I'm going to park my questions because we got a question online that I really think that you would be able to address. So if you very shortly, because I know it can take a long time to address this one, but we got a question from Katie Buckingham online asking us, so isn't access to these healthcare apps as much an issue as the availability, especially in populations that suffer chronic health, older and underprivileged patients? How can this be addressed by companies that developing them? So I guess I'm giving you a challenge here, Yossi. I guess this is constantly on your mind. How do we ensure to include everyone?
So I want to tell you a secret. Most of the chronic patients, and I fully agree with the question. Most of the chronic patients, guess what? They do not use Fitbit to track their activity. That's part of the issue. That if you jog 3 times a week and you go to the gym, you automatically reduce your risk for chronic diseases. So indeed, when having these patients in mind, you need to think about patients that are 55 and older, that are not necessarily tech savvy, and that are also so from a socioeconomic perspective, they are not necessarily, the ones standing to buy the latest Apple device when it comes out. That's why Sweetch collects the data from the lowest common denominator. So it's the patient's smartphone. Today, smartphones are available, for almost everyone. And we don't need wearables to collect the data. We don't need special sensors to collect the data. Most of the data is collected from, this extension of our body. So that's and in practical, if you look at the Hopkins trial, the average age of the patients there were 57 and from a low to medium socioeconomic state. So great question, and it is indeed on our mind.
Thank you so much. Great question and great answer. Again, Yossi, thank you so much. Looking forward to our future collaboration going forward. And I wish you and the team the very best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we will be moving on. And Dominic, before I leave the word to you, I just have to read something that I found on the G4A internet page. It says something extraordinary. Bayer G4A works with extraordinary people to develop new health solutions in the digital world. We are a global team of intra and entrepreneurs enabling positive disruption to change the experience of health. I can only say, wow, you set yourself an amazing target. Dominic Kennerson, head of G4A, you're responsible for making this happen. Please, the word is yours.
Thanks so much, Hugo. Yeah, it really is an honor and a privilege to work with G4A. And so much of that, to be fair and transparent, I don't even think it's a target. And I think that this conversation that we've had today actually points to a lot of that, because that really is our reality. I think we've heard that from Mike Devoy, from Karina, Michal, and Yossi. And of course, you all would put me after Yossi, who is always a tough act to follow. So I was asked to speak about telehealth, which I think is interesting. And I think there's a lot that we can learn, especially right now. What I've heard from the other presenters absolutely aligns with everything that I've been thinking about. The way that I set this up, I have about 5 minutes and probably at least $14 billion of information to go through and about 2 different health systems to compare and contrast. So I'll try to do this expeditiously. As expeditiously as possible. So I just have like 5 big points, really. I'll talk a little bit about social determinants of health. especially how those relate and connect between Israel and the US, some public policy and viewpoints, mostly from the US, which large healthcare system, very complex and complicated, where we can learn a lot from. And then I'll talk a little bit about financing, again, through the lenses of Israel and the US, and then some cross-border considerations, which again, as a global unit, is something that we're always taking a look at. So we've heard, I think, quite a bit already today about the three pillars that you see on the left. So social determinants of health, artificial intelligence, thank you again, Yossi. We've heard the public policy and regulatory environment mentioned quite a bit. And as a healthcare company, you are normally breaking down those big components into NCDs, or chronic diseases, population aging and healthy aging, healthcare spending, and sustainability. That was at least in late 2019. What we learned through COVID is that we learned how important all of these three buckets really are, because then if you had an NCD, you were at increased risk for COVID. If you were older, you were at an increased risk for COVID. And then the conversation around healthcare spending, which is a little bit about what I will talk about, that has changed a lot into investing. And I think I could have actually renamed this presentation, so to say, to Digital Health is Growing Up. And I think 2020 showed us that, and Q1 2021. So these next few slides, I will show you one slide on social determinants of health, which is this slide right here. Essentially what that means is that your social determinants of health is everything about you. It's if you have a fresh food market in your neighborhood, it's the #1 predictor of your health is zip code. It's a lot about what Yossi was saying. Who are you as a person? What's your profile? It encompasses your education level. I think it's really interesting when you look at the data at a very high level between systems like the Israel and the United States, for example. One, Israel has very relatively high life expectancy, higher than the OECD average. US has lower than the OECD average. But then when you look at the far right column around self-related health, what we see is that US is at 2.6. So what this means is that most people in the US think that they are very healthy, as opposed to Israel, where 10% think that they are very unhealthy. But the data around mortality and morbidity don't really suggest that at all. And I think this is interesting for people like Yossi or Mihal, because then how do you think about developing a healthcare solution or addressing a challenge in your healthcare environment? Then, very quick summary on public policy and viewpoints. At the top above the timeline, I have a few kind of public policy highlights, again, from the United States. At the bottom there, below the timeline, I have some high-level survey data from a company called Health Union. Health Union, they have online communities, over 24 online communities. I thought their data was really quite interesting because they have a population set that is 100% chronic, and they had 4 or 5 different surveys last year to unlock and talk about telehealth and telemedicine. And what you see here is that throughout the pandemic in 2020, all of their survey respondents essentially said that they were going to embrace or adapt a telehealth appointment, to where by the end of the year in 2020, 3/4 said that they actually did have a telehealth visit. And again, to Yossi's point, this brings into the conversation, and what they really started understanding is that you have stratification or differences based around gender, age. So we heard, if you're over 55 or over 57, how do you actually use healthcare technology and information, income and education? So again, this gets a little bit back into social determinants of health. I think what's really important, and we heard Mike Devoy mention this earlier, if we go back to above the timeline, everyone knows about the global public health emergency. This had kind of a ripple effect around the globe, especially in the regulatory space. So the US FDA, they put out their first guideline documents about a year ago. They followed that up around this time last year to focus on mental and behavioral health. And what we've seen from a financing point of view, which I'll talk about on the next 2 to 3 slides, is that this really kind of opened the floodgates. What this means right now, late 2020, actually, a lot of the kind of without being too technical, the physician fee schedule changed a bit, and then it's still focused on rural. So that's a place where Congress and where a lot of advocacy organizations are still focusing. And then what we actually have in U.S. Congress is the upper house and the lower house are working a lot on this in a bipartisan way. All this says is that digital health went gangbusters last year in 2020. I think if you were to break down that 14.1 billion in U.S. Digital health ecosystem spending, it would be about $44 per person. When we look at Israel, so about 95% of healthcare funding in the Middle East comes from Israel. If we were to break that down on a per capita basis, that would be about $55 per person. So even going back to Karina's presentation, you know, this is a highly innovative ecosystem. What we saw last year is that telemedicine and remote monitoring, both, which comprise telehealth, played a very large role in funding for Middle East and Israel. That was kind of broken down around treatment, awareness, adherence, clinical workflow, non-clinical workflows. The two largest categories were absolutely around treatment and awareness. What does this kind of mean going forward? So I was actually surprised that the World Health Organization, they put out a lot of information late 2019 around their digital health strategy. What they have not done in some time is actually update their telehealth framework. But what they did say back in 2016 is that there's a lack of funding, a lack of infrastructure, competing health systems. All of that has changed in 2020 and in 2021. In 2021 alone, in Q1 2021, US, I think, total digital health venture investing was 6.7 billion. So almost a complete total from 2019. And what we're seeing is that there are some very large telehealth deals that are creating, I think, new kind of market validation points. There's a company like Ro, Lyra Health. A lot of that kind of built on the back of the Televango deal that took place in Q3 last year. I already mentioned the bipartisan activity. These market models and value pools, again, when you're valuing a company, when you have a Televango or a Teladoc and Livongo merger or acquisition activity, that is public information that a lot of other companies can build their valuations on. So that's happening. I think an opportunity for Israel will absolutely be in the space for telehealth and cybersecurity. Again, we've heard about the innovation context for Israel. Cybersecurity plays a very large role in that. Again, that could be an opportunity that Karina and her team could look at. Mike Devoy mentioned integrated care, Yossi as well. And I think what integrated care really means, when you have an AI system, you can then have a very seamless kind of a behavioral change modification experience to impact your chronic disease. And with that, I'll stop.
Dominic, thank you so much for your presentation. Highly interesting. I'm sure we could talk about this one much, much more. Sorry, we didn't have more time. 2 minutes left of the meeting. I also want to recognize people who actually took the effort and wrote to us online, posting questions. I really would have liked to take the time to address these questions. Now, apologize if I mispronounce your names. Faride Hossein Khani, thank you for your question. Highly appreciated. I'm sorry we didn't get to it. And the same also with Utso Etsaike. You had an excellent question online today. Unfortunately, we couldn't reach this one. With 1 minute left of this session, it brings us to an end of the meeting. I would like to take the opportunity to thank all speakers for their excellent contribution tonight. I would also like to thank all the people working behind the scenes making this event possible. And a special thanks to the dream team of Nama, Inbal, Danit, Alon, Dennis, Sophie, and Scarlett. Thank you so much. And thank to all of you guys for joining us online. I hope some of you came back from the first meeting we arranged. I promise there will be another Digital Health in Motion meeting from Israel. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. I hope you got inspiration. And from the startup companies, maybe from the authorities, and maybe now this is the little push you need in order to go forward with your idea. If you like to see this event again, there was something you missed, certain parts you would forward to your friends, it's going to be posted online on LinkedIn in a recorded setting. Thank you. Laitraot, à bientôt, auf Wiedersehen, goodbye. God kväll, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hugo.